So I would like to take just a little bit of time to look at the concept that you can see on your screen here of the fear of the Lord, but I want to take a look at it in regard to what we read in Psalm 128 and the first 4 verses. So I'm going to begin by simply opening up and reading Psalm 128 verses 1 through 4. Blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. When you eat the labor of your hands, you shall be happy, and it shall be well with you. Your wife shall be like a fruitful vine in the very heart of your house, your children like olive plants all around your table. Behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord. And so that's really the direction that I want to go with in this particular lesson, is that final statement that says, behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord. And the first thing that we want to do is define what we mean when we say the fear of the Lord. And I have a couple of different definitions given by some people that I thought were pretty good in explaining this particular concept. Sinclair Ferguson said it's that indefinable mixture of reverence, fear, pleasure, joy, and awe which fill our hearts when we realize who God is and what he has done for us. And James Boyce said, God must be taken seriously. He must not be trifled with. He must be, as he actually is, the center of everything we are, think, or aspire to do. He must be the starting point for every project, the strength we seek for every valuable endeavor, the one we earnestly desire to please and honor as our goal. And so we have this idea of fear in regards to reverence, pleasure, joy, and awe, recognizing who God is. And those who have a proper fear of the Lord will put him at the very center of their lives, and they will do everything they can to please him, because they recognize what it is that he has done for them, what he will do for them going forward. And so now we're going to kind of break down these particular verses. Blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. And the inalienable right of a person to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is embedded in the very fabric of who we are as a nation. And I want to make the statement that blessed can in fact be translated as happy. And so one could say, happy is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. And we understand that as a people, our desire is in fact the pursuit of happiness. All mankind desires it, but the problem is we often look in the wrong places. Many will try to find happiness in their leisure activities, in whatever individual pursuits they think are best for them, and they do so without involving God in their search. And this is the opposite of the way happiness can be found in this psalm. We just looked at the idea that those who fear the Lord put him at the center of everything that they do. So they recognize that any pursuits that they may endeavor in, any way that they wish to enjoy their leisure activities, they're going to have God in the forefront of their mind before they attempt to do any of those things. Psalm 11 in verse 10 tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and a good understanding have all those who do his commandments. His praise endures forever. So when we talk about the person who fears the Lord, it brings about wisdom. And it also causes us, as we see, to have a good understanding when we follow his commands. In Proverbs chapter 1 verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And so when we look at this idea of happy is everyone who fears the Lord and walks in his ways, one of those reasons is because it is where we find wisdom and knowledge. in Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 16, and we'll go ahead and we'll turn there. Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 16, we find the following statement. Actually, we'll pick up at verse 15. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil, in that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways and to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his judgment, that you may live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. So, you are to walk in God's ways, and if you do so, he's telling the people here, if they do so, they will be blessed in their ways. You can mark down Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 21 as another area to read. Let's go ahead and turn over to 1 Kings chapter 2, and we'll look at verses 1 through 4. That's 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, and recognizing the idea of happy or blessed is the one who walks in the Lord's ways. Beginning at verse 1, it said, Then the days of David drew near that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do, wherever you turn, that the Lord may fulfill his word which he spoke concerning me, saying, If your sons take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul, he said, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. So he says, if you continue to walk in the Lord's ways, you will be blessed. This is David's instructions as he is on his dying, or he's coming to the point where his life is coming to an end, and he's reminding his son to continue to walk in the ways of the Lord, and he will be blessed. We'll look at one more passage, the 119th Psalm, verses 1 through 8. Psalm 119, verses 1 through 8 says, Blessed are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the law of the Lord. And again, we could also use the term happy here as well. Blessed are those who keep his testimonies, who seek him with their whole heart. Excuse me. They also do no iniquity, they walk in his ways. You have commanded us to keep your precepts diligently. Oh, that my ways were directed to keep your statutes. Then I would not be ashamed when I look into all your commandments. I will praise you with uprightness of heart when I learn your righteous judgments. I will keep your statutes. Oh, do not forsake me utterly. And so again, there is this idea of blessedness coming from those who fear the Lord, as well as in this particular instance, we're focusing on the second half of this statement, those who walk in his way. Continuing on in the verse, it says, in verse 2 it says, When you eat of the labor of your hands, you shall be happy, and it shall be well with you. And I have here the statement that you need to keep your focus on God. And you might wonder why that particular statement, as it relates to the ability to eat of the labor of your hands and be happy. Haggai chapter 1 verses 5 through 6 tells us, Now therefore thus says the Lord of hosts, Consider your ways. You have sown much, and bring in little. You eat, but do not have enough. You drink, but you are not filled with drink. You clothe yourselves, but no one is warm. And he who earns wages to put into a bag with holes. And so we have this idea that's the opposite of what we're reading in the verse above. It says, when you eat of the labor of your hands, you shall be happy and things will go well. Here we see just the opposite. These people are trying to eat of the labor of their hands, and it says that the wages are put into a bag with holes. They're eating, but they're not enough. they're having drink, but they're not filled. And this is something that he is saying you need to consider your ways. Consider why this is taking place. And the reason being is they've lost their focus on God. They've forgotten where their blessings come from. And so we see that they lose those blessings. You see here we have 3 different verses to look at in Ecclesiastes. So let's turn over to Ecclesiastes, starting with chapter 2, and we'll look at verse 24. Ecclesiastes chapter 2 and verse 24. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good works in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. And so when the wise man is writing here, and he's writing about this idea of eating of the labor of your hands, and that there's nothing better than that, he's a recognition that this is a gift from God. The focus is still on God, and the recognition that God has given him the ability to perform this labor that allows for him to eat of its blessings. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 9 through 13. What profit has the labor from that in which he labors? I have seen the God-given task with which the sons of men are to be occupied. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also he has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from the beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. And so again, why will you be happy when you eat of the labor of your hands? Why will it go well with you? It's because you have a mindset that says this work, this labor that I am doing is a gift. It's a gift that comes from God. Too many people take God out of the focus, and they don't enjoy the labor of their hands because they don't see work as a gift. They see it as miserable. They see it as something they have to do. With the proper mindset, when you go in, if your focus is on God, no matter what your labor, no matter what your toil or task is, you shall be happy. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, beginning at verse 18 and looking at verses 18, 19, and 20. Here is what I have seen. It is good and fitting for one to eat and drink, and to enjoy the good of all his labor, in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life, which God gives him, for it is his heritage. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he will not dwell ungodly. Verse 20. For he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. And so again, we see this working in labor is a gift and a heritage from God. Your wife shall be like a fruitful vine in the very heart of your house. And so we're back to looking at verse 3 and the beginning statement. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 28, if you'd like to turn there, we have this idea of fruitful. Genesis chapter 1 and verse 28. The Word of God says, Then God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the flesh of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living thing that moves on the earth. And so we understand here the idea of your wife being like a fruitful vine can in fact be the idea of the blessings that come from having a wife who also helps you to fear the Lord. But there is so much more that I believe could be talked about here in this idea of a fruitful vine. This is the idea of what we read about of a worthy woman in Proverbs chapter 31, and the idea of all of the things that she does to help her husband, and the fact that she recognizes that he is one who fears the Lord, and she is a blessing to him from God. And we see this in Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 22. We recognize the idea of the blessing that comes from having a wife that is like a fruitful vine. Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 22. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. And I want to make a side note here, just to kind of remind us that in the home, if you're going to have a fruitful vine, the husband needs to be setting an example of what it means to fear the Lord, what it means to put the Lord first, what it means to do the labor that God expects him to do. And then in like manner, when the woman sees a godly man, she will strive to live the life of a godly woman, which will lead us to the idea of godly children. Continuing on in verse 3, your children shall be like olive plants all around your table. And I thought it was kind of interesting, this picture that we have here of the olive branches at the table together, and the idea we find in Psalm 127 and verses 3 through 5, which say, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb is his reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with their enemies in the gate. And so this idea of being blessed or being happy to have these children, and the idea of the fact that they are a gift from God. In Proverbs 22 and verse 6, the Word of God says that if you train up a child in the way he should go, when he is old, he will not depart from it. And then our final verse in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. And the idea of Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. And as you take a look at this, as we're turning to Ephesians, I want you to take a look at this and the idea of the fact that we don't see people, we don't see families gathered around the table at all like this, and the idea of family time. And I wonder if maybe it's something that would be more beneficial if we would take more time to do that, for us to come together, to take time out in a day to be together as a family and to share with one another. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4 says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. And fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. And so, if you do these things, then they are going to be a blessing to you. And a word of note, it may take some time. There are going to be struggles that exist. It doesn't mean that your children are going to be perfect right out of the gate. But if you continue to set the example, if you continue to show yourself a man who fears the Lord, if your wife continues to set an example and she continues to fear the Lord, then your children will recognize this and they will do the same. Another analogy that I heard regarding this idea of the olive shoots come from the idea that they all come from one base. And so they shoot out and they grow from this particular base. And they all receive strength from the same place. And so if you are faithful, and that is the source that you're receiving it from, and it's branching out, ultimately the hope is that they shall receive their strength and will receive their strength from the same source that you do. So the conclusion is, behold, thus the man be blessed who fears the Lord. So why should we fear the Lord? Because we will be blessed. We will be happy. And one more statement. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. The conclusion of the matter is, fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And I hope that these thoughts have kind of given you a little bit different idea of why the fear of the Lord is important, and seeing it from a more positive standpoint in regards to the fear of the Lord brings about blessings and happiness. Thank you.